The Zendar colony on Delta Pavonis III had been under siege for 47 standard days. Commander Sujin Park stared at the orbital scanner with hollow eyes as another wave of enemy warships entered the system. The sleek, predatory shapes of the vessels resembled nothing so much as deep-sea creatures from Earth's oceans, their hulls glimmering with an oily sheen that somehow absorbed rather than reflected the light of the system's sun. "How many?" she asked, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. Lieutenant Du Young Han looked up from his console, face drawn and pale. 17 new capital ships, Commander. Their energy signatures match the Scorcher class we encountered last week. Sujin closed her eyes briefly. The Scorchers had decimated their eastern defensive grid with barely any effort. These ships could fire plasma streams that burned through shield harmonics like they weren't even there. The colony's remaining defensive platforms will fail within hours, Du Young continued, tapping through sensor readings. Their targeting systems are already compromised. Through the viewport, Sujin could see the once beautiful sky of Delta Pavonis III, now perpetually darkened by smoke and atmospheric disturbance. The attackers had been methodical in their assault, taking out communications first, then power. Grids, then defensive installations. They hadn't even bothered targeting civilians yet. They didn't need to. Everyone knew what came next. "Status of the bunker network?" she asked, turning to Chief Engineer Sun OK Kang, who had been working without rest to expand the underground shelters. "We've managed to reinforce the main chambers," Sunok replied, projecting a holographic map of the colony's subterranean levels. "But life support is stretched thin. 10,000 people need air, water, and food. At current capacity, we have maybe 8 days before systems begin to fail." Sujin nodded grimly. Their attackers knew this too. They were content to wait. In the far corner of the command bunker, young technician Tae-ho Kim sat hunched over a workstation that no one paid much attention to. At 26, he was the newest addition to the command staff, brought in just before the siege began because of his expertise in pre-settlement technology. Now, as the others discussed increasingly desperate defensive measures, his attention was fixed on something he'd found 3 levels below, in a storage unit that predated the colony itself. It was a beacon, not just any communications device, but an Earth-made emergency transmitter from the original survey mission, nearly 2 centuries old. The colony had been established during the golden years of the Galactic Concord, when Earth was still a major player in interstellar affairs. Before they had withdrawn, before they had seemingly abandoned their children among the stars, Tae-ho had spent the last 6 hours carefully restoring power to the device, replacing corroded components with parts salvaged from less essential systems. The beacon operated on frequencies no longer monitored by modern ships, frequencies that predated standardized Concord communications protocols. No one on the command staff had authorized what he was about to do. Many would call it a waste of precious power. Some might even call it treason, opening a channel that could potentially be tracked by the enemy. But Tae-ho had studied Earth's history, had read the classified archives about humanity's homeworld. That few bothered with anymore. Earth hadn't withdrawn because it was weak. The old records hinted at something else, something the Concord had refused to acknowledge. With trembling fingers, Tae-ho connected the final power coupling. The ancient device hummed to life, its display flickering with ghostly green characters. In an outdated script, he'd prepared a compressed message containing everything: the colony's coordinates, population statistics, enemy vessel configurations, and a simple plea. "We are your children. We need you." Across the bunker, alarms suddenly blared. "Multiple impacts in Sector 7, shouted Tactical Officer Min Ji-yoon. "They've taken out the communications array." Sujin slammed her fist against the console. "That was our last link to the Concord outposts." In the chaos that followed, no one noticed Tae-ho's finger hovering over the beacon's activation switch. The colony was now completely cut off. No help would come from the Concord. They were too far, too disorganized, too afraid. But Earth was something else entirely. Tae-ho pressed the switch. The ancient device vibrated silently, sending its signal outward on frequencies that hadn't been used in generations. The message shot through subspace, bypassing the enemy's jamming systems, precisely because they were too advanced to account for such primitive technology. Later that night, as the bunker's lights dimmed to conserve power, Tae-ho stood before Commander Su-jin, confessing what he had done. "You did what?" she asked, not angry but confused. "Contacted Earth with century-old tech?" "Yes, Commander," he replied. "I found records in the original colony charter. Earth never officially abandoned us. They just stopped communicating." Su-jin sighed deeply. "Tae-ho, everyone knows Earth retreated from galactic affairs. They faced internal pressures, resource depletion. They could barely maintain their own population, let alone help colonies across 20 star systems." "That's what the Concord tells us," Tae-ho insisted. "But I found older data. Before I joined the command staff, I worked in the archives. There were transmissions, classified ones, suggesting Earth didn't withdraw out of weakness. They withdrew because they saw something coming, something the Concord refused to acknowledge. Outside, the sky burned as another defensive satellite fell from orbit, streaking like a dying star across the night. The colonists watched from whatever shelter they could find, knowing that with each passing day, their chances diminished. None of them could imagine that across the vast emptiness of space, Tae-ho's desperate message was already being received by ears that had been listening all along, waiting for just such a call. On Earth, Admiral Ji-woo Lee stood on the observation deck of the EDF Indomitable, watching as her battle group executed a perfect pincer maneuver around a simulated enemy force. Holographic projections of hostile vessels, modeled after known galactic Concord designs, shattered and dispersed as Earth's fighters cut through their formations with surgical precision. Simulation complete. Objective achieved. Civilian casualties, 0, fleet losses minimal, announced the ship's AI in its calm, measured voice. Ji-woo nodded with satisfaction, but not surprise. She expected nothing less from her crews. For 200 years, Earth had been training, building, preparing, all behind the veil of supposed isolation. "Admiral," her communications officer Hai-won Cho called from his station, voice suddenly tense. "We're picking up something unusual. A signal on the old emergency channels, pre-Concord protocols." Ji-woo frowned. No one used those frequencies anymore. The Galactic Concord had standardized communications across known space decades ago. Only Earth maintained the old systems, a redundancy that many of her subordinates considered excessive. "Source?" she asked, already moving toward the communications array. "It's..." Haewon's eyes widened. "It's from Delta Pavonis III, the Zendar colony." A hush fell over the bridge. Everyone knew about Zendar, one of the first human colonies established outside the Sol system, now nominally under Concord protection. Earth had officially abandoned it, along with all other extrasolar colonies, when humanity's homeworld staged its strategic withdrawal from galactic politics. "Put it through," Ji-woo ordered. The message was fragmented, deteriorated by its journey through subspace, but clear enough. A colony under siege, defensive systems failing, and a desperate plea from people who still considered themselves children of Earth. Ji-woo's expression hardened as she listened to the details about the attacking forces. The description matched intelligence reports she'd reviewed just last week. Reports about an aggressive species operating at the edges of Concord space, testing boundaries, probing defenses. "Signal the Admiralty," she said when the message ended. "Priority Alpha, activation code Heimdall." Her executive officer, Captain Sung-min Park, looked at her with barely concealed shock. "Heimdall, Admiral. That would mean..." "First contact," Ji-woo finished for him. "Yes, the time has come." Within minutes, the holographic form of Grand Admiral Junho Ryu materialized on the bridge, his weathered face grave. "You're certain this is genuine?" he asked without preamble. "The authentication codes match pre-withdrawal protocols," Ji-woo confirmed, "and the description of the attacking forces aligns with our intelligence on the Nexari Dominion. They're making their move." "Exactly." "As we predicted." Grand Admiral Ryu considered this for a long moment. 2 centuries ago, Earth's best analysts had forecasted the eventual collapse of the Galactic Concord's fragile peace. They had identified rising powers that would eventually challenge the established order, powers that the Concord refused to acknowledge as threats. Rather than waste resources trying to convince their allies, Earth had made the difficult decision to withdraw. to prepare independently for the coming storm. The Concorde won't respond in time, Ryu said finally. Their bureaucracy will debate, while the colony burns. The Zendar colonists have 8 days at most, Jiwoo replied. We can be there in 5. Ryu nodded once, decisively. Heimdall Protocol is now active. Assemble the first fleet. Earth reveals itself today. The connection ended and Jiwoo turned to her crew. Battle stations, prepare for immediate departure. The next few hours were a blur of controlled chaos as Earth's defense grid came alive across the solar system. Ships hidden in asteroid bases, disguised as civilian stations, or concealed beneath the icy surfaces of distant moons, activated their systems and emerged from hiding. From her command chair, Jiwoo watched as vessels joined her battle group, not just the Indomitable and her support craft, but hundreds of ships, each representing the pinnacle of human military engineering. Unlike the gaudy visible weapons of conquered vessels, Earth ships were sleek, utilitarian, their true power hidden beneath unremarkable exteriors. The Unity-class dreadnoughts formed the backbone of the fleet, each one nearly 2 kilometers in length, their hulls incorporating metamaterials that absorbed scanner waves rather than reflecting them. The Phantom-class stealth cruisers slipped into formation, their advanced cloaking systems rendering them nearly invisible even to Allied sensors. Swarms of Wasp fighters surrounded the larger vessels, their AI pilots networked in a hive mind that could coordinate thousands of craft in real time. Most impressive were the 3 Harbinger-class carriers taking position at the rear of the formation. Each carried within it enough firepower to subjugate a small star system, along with legions of mechanized ground forces should they be needed. This is Admiral Lee to all vessels, Jiwoo broadcast across the fleet channels. For 2 centuries we have prepared for this day. Earth withdrew from galactic affairs not out of weakness, but with purpose. While the Concorde ignored the signs, we built. While they compromised, we refined. While they debated, we trained. She paused, looking at the tactical display showing the fleet, the largest assemblage of military might the solar system had seen since the Unification Wars. Today our children have called for aid, and Earth will answer. Jump coordinates are being transmitted to all vessels. Our destination is Delta Pavonis III. Our mission is the protection of human colonists under attack by forces identified as Nexari Dominion warships. Throughout the fleet, jump drives began to spin up, creating precisely calculated tiers in spacetime that would allow the vessels to traverse the vast distance in mere days. Some of you may wonder if we are truly ready, Jiwoo continued, if our long isolation has prepared us sufficiently. To you, I say this: the technologies we have developed, the strategies we have perfected, the weapons we have created, they are unlike anything the galaxy has seen. The Concorde believes Earth retreated to lick its wounds. Today they will learn the truth. The first vessels began to disappear into jump points, reality folding around them in brilliant flashes of blue-white energy. For Earth, for humanity, for all our children among the stars. As the Indomitable prepared for jump, Jiwoo gazed one last time at the blue marble of Earth through the viewport. When she returned, the galaxy would never be the same. The jump engines reached critical threshold, and the fleet vanished into the void, leaving only ripples in spacetime as evidence of their passage. And a solar system suddenly empty of the most formidable military force human hands had ever created. Klaxons wailed through the underground bunker as Commander Soo-Jin Park sprinted down the central corridor, her uniform stained with hydraulic fluid from manually sealing the pressure doors. Around her, colonial security forces herded frightened civilians deeper into the shelter complex. "Move quickly, but don't run," she called out, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "Follow the blue guidance lights." A young mother clutched her infant to her chest, eyes wide with terror as the ground shook from another orbital bombardment. Soo-Jin steadied her with a firm hand. "You're doing great," she assured the woman. "Level 3 has the pediatric support units. Dr. Yunseo is waiting there." The daily routine had become grimly familiar. Each morning, the enemy ships would select a new target on the surface: a neighborhood, a food production facility, a water reclamation plant, and reduce it to atoms. They were being methodical, dismantling the colony piece by piece. "Commander!" The voice belonged to Security Chief Wu Jin Kang, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. "Eastern sector is completely gone. The agricultural domes collapsed. We've got hundreds more civilians incoming." Su Jin swore under her breath. The agricultural domes had been their last source of fresh food. Now they were down to emergency rations only. "How many can the level 4 shelters hold?" she asked. "Maybe 4,000, Wu Jin replied grimly. "We've got 10,000 people to protect." Another impact rattled the ceiling, sending dust cascading down. The lights flickered ominously before stabilizing. "We'll convert the maintenance tunnels," Su Jin decided. "It won't be comfortable, but it's better than the alternative." Above them, the colony's final defensive shield was failing. Its generators, once capable of repelling all but the most determined assault, now strained to maintain even basic coverage over the central sectors. Each impact drained precious power they couldn't spare. In the communications hub buried deepest in the complex, Tae-ho Kim sat alone, surrounded by silent equipment. Since sending his desperate message to Earth 4 days ago, he had maintained his position, scanning all frequencies for any response. His superior officers had humored him at first, then pitied him, and finally ignored him as the situation grew more dire. "Still watching the static, Kim?" asked Jin Ho, a maintenance technician, stopping by to check the hub's cooling systems. "Oh, you should get some rest. Nothing's coming through that receiver." Tae-ho shook his head. "Someone's listening. I know it." Jin Ho shrugged and moved on. Tae-ho understood the skepticism. Earth had been silent for generations. The homeworld was a myth to many colonists now, a bedtime story about a blue planet where humanity began. But Tae-ho had studied the old records, had found the patterns in Earth's supposed withdrawal that others missed. The 6th day brought a new horror. The enemy landing craft had begun their descent. "They're through the upper atmosphere," reported Minji from Tactical, her voice unnaturally calm. "Trajectory suggests they're heading for the capital district." From the command center's remaining functional screens, they watched the invasion force descend. Sleek, chitinous vessels that resembled monstrous insects, their hulls gleaming with an iridescent quality that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "What do we know about their ground troops?" Su Jin asked, though she already knew the answer. "Nothing confirmed," Wu Jin replied. "Only rumors from the frontier worlds. Some say they're biomechanical, others say they're something worse." That night, as the enemy established their landing zones on the surface, the colonists huddled in darkness. Power conservation had become critical. Only essential systems received full allocation, which meant most living spaces went without heat or light for 16 hours each day. Su Jin moved among her people, offering what comfort she could. Children whispered questions she couldn't answer. Adults asked with their eyes what they wouldn't say aloud. "Are we going to die here?" By the morning of the 7th day, their situation had become desperate. The planetary shield had failed completely. During the night, their supplies would last perhaps another week at current rationing levels. The enemy was systematically establishing ground control across the colony's surface, targeting key infrastructure that hadn't already been destroyed from orbit. "They're being careful not to damage the geothermal taps," noted Sunoke, studying sensor readings from the few remaining surface probes. "They want the planet intact. Not the people, though," Su Jin responded grimly, "just the real estate." In the communications hub, Tae-ho's vigil continued. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, his stomach growled from reduced rations, but he refused to abandon his post. Every hour on the hour, he resent the distress call, though the power allocation for his station had been cut to barely operational levels. "This is Zendar Colony on Delta Pavonis III, he repeated into the void. "We are under attack. We need help. Earth, if you're listening, your children need you." Static answered him, as it had for days. His console chirped a warning, power levels dropping again as life support demanded priority. Soon his equipment would shut down entirely. "Please," he whispered to the uncaring receiver. "Anyone." Above, on the colony's surface, enemy troop carriers deployed their cargo, 8-limbed creatures in seamless armor that moved with unnatural coordination. Colony sensors captured fragments of their advance, before going offline one by one. In the command center, Su-Jin made her final preparations. "If they breach the main doors, we implement Protocol Omega," she told her officers, referring to the colony's last resort defense plan. "We collapse the outer sections and retreat to the core. We can hold out there for maybe 3 more days." No one mentioned what would happen after those 3 days. The enemy forces located the main bunker entrance by mid-afternoon. Their cutting tools began working on the reinforced doors immediately, the sound of their machinery reverberating through the complex like some massive, hungry creature trying to dig out its prey. 2 hours before breach, estimated Wu-Jin, listening to the sounds with a practiced ear. Su-Jin nodded. "Begin Protocol Omega. Move everyone to the core shelters." As the evacuation began, Tae-ho sat motionless at his station, which now operated on emergency power only. The communications array was among the systems scheduled to be abandoned in the withdrawal to the core. "Kim," called a voice from the doorway. It was Commander Park herself. "It's time to go. We're sealing this section." Tae-ho looked up at her, eyes red-rimmed but determined. "5 more minutes, Commander, please." Something in his expression must have reached her because she hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. Then you run to the core. Understood?" "Yes, Commander." 4 minutes later, as Tae-ho prepared to abandon his station, his console emitted a tone he'd never heard before, a deep, resonant pulse that made the air itself seem to vibrate. The scanner display exploded with activity. At the very edge of the system, hundreds of energy signatures suddenly appeared where empty space had existed moments before. His training took over as he frantically worked to identify them. "Commander!" he shouted into his communicator. "Something's happening." In the command center, all remaining screens lit up simultaneously as the colony's few functioning sensors detected a massive arrival at the system's edge. "Are those ships?" asked Minji in disbelief, staring at the readings. Su-Jin squinted at the display, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. "That's impossible. There must be over 300 vessels there." The enemy forces had detected the new arrivals too. Their assault on the bunker doors paused. Their ships in orbit began to reposition, moving to confront the unexpected threat. Tae-ho's voice crackled over the command center speakers. "Commander, they're broadcasting on the Old Earth emergency channel." A moment later, a clear, powerful voice filled the command center. A woman's voice speaking with an authority that seemed to cut through the fear and exhaustion like a blade through darkness. "This is Admiral Ji-Woo Lee of the Earth Defense Force. Zendar Colony, if you can hear us, hold on. Help has arrived." On the tactical display, the Earth vessels moved with impossible precision, their formation shifting like a living organism as they accelerated toward the planet. Leading the charge were ships unlike anything the colonists had ever seen. Massive, angular vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, their hulls bearing the simple insignia of Earth. Admiral Ji-Woo Lee stood on the command deck of the EDF Indomitable, her posture rigid as she surveyed the tactical display. The enemy fleet, now identified as Nexari vessels, had formed a defensive perimeter around Delta Pavonis III, their ships arranged in the classic Concorde-style layered defense that had become standard throughout the galaxy. "Open all frequencies," she ordered. "Let them hear us." Communications Officer Hai-Won nodded. "Channel open, Admiral. Broadcasting on all standard bands and the Old Earth emergency channel." Ji-Woo's voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable edge of steel as she spoke. "This is Earth Defense Force Armada. Delta Pavonis III is under our protection. Withdraw immediately or face extinction." For several seconds, silence filled the comm channels. Then a harsh, clicking response came through, translated by the ship's computers into understandable speech. "Unidentified fleet. This system is claimed by the Nexari Dominion. Your interference is unwelcome. Depart or be destroyed." Captain Sung-min raised an eyebrow. "They don't recognize Earth ships." "Why would they?" Ji-Woo replied. "No one has seen our vessels for 2 centuries. The tactical display updated as the Nexari fleet began to move. Their larger warships turned ponderously toward the Earth Armada, while smaller, faster attack craft surged forward in advance formations. "They're deploying combat swarms," reported Tactical Officer Jun Seo. "Standard Concord-inspired tactics. Wear down our shields before the capital ships engage." Jiwoo nodded. "As expected. They've never faced an Earth fleet. They think they know what they're dealing with." She tapped a command into her console. "All vessels, implement Combat Protocol Theta. WASP squadrons initiate hive mind coordination. Throughout the Earth fleet, hundreds of fighter-sized craft detached from their carrier vessels. Unlike traditional fighters, these WASP-class interceptors operated on a distributed AI network that allowed them to function as a single organism. Their movements synchronized with inhuman precision. From the colony's underground command center, Commander Sujin Park and her officers watched in stunned silence as the sensor displays showed the unfolding battle. They had expected death today. Instead, they were witnessing something unprecedented. "Look at how they move," whispered Minji, pointing at the tactical display where the Earth fighters flowed like liquid around the advancing Nexari swarms. The Earth interceptors didn't engage conventionally. Instead of meeting the enemy head-on, they executed a complex three-dimensional maneuver that seemed to collapse in on the Nexari formation from all sides simultaneously. It was like watching a school of predatory fish envelop their prey. "I've never seen coordination like this," Wu Jin said in awe. "It's not possible." In orbit above them, the Nexari commanders were reaching the same conclusion. Their attack swarms, effective against any Concord defense they had ever encountered, suddenly found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. Earth's fighters anticipated their movements with impossible accuracy, as if they could predict the Nexari tactical algorithms. "The enemy is adapting to our formations," reported a Nexari sub-commander, his chitinous appendages clicking nervously against his control interface. "They're isolating our units faster than we can regroup." The Nexari overseer, a massive creature whose carapace bore the scars of a dozen successful conquests, hissed with irritation. "Deploy the heavy cruisers. Overwhelm them with firepower." The larger Nexari vessels moved to engage. Admiral Lee activated the next phase of Earth's response. "Unity-class dreadnoughts move to formation Epsilon," she commanded. "Deploy gravitational lances." 6 enormous vessels, each nearly 2 kilometers in length, glided forward with surprising grace for their size. Mechanical apertures along their flanks dilated, revealing weapons emplacements unlike anything seen in Concord space. "Gravitational lances charged, Admiral," reported Jun Seo. "Target solutions acquired." Fire. What happened next defied conventional understanding of space combat. From the Earth dreadnoughts, invisible beams of concentrated gravitational distortion lanced out toward the approaching Nexari cruisers. Where they struck, space itself seemed to warp and twist. Metal groaned and buckled as artificial gravity. Wells formed inside the enemy vessels, crushing bulkheads and rupturing power cores. 3 Nexari heavy cruisers crumpled like paper toys, their hulls imploding from forces they had no defense against. Hayforth spun wildly out of control as its propulsion system was torn apart by conflicting gravitational fields. In the colony command center, Taeho Kim's eyes widened as he monitored the battle through the few remaining sensor arrays. "Commander, are you seeing this? They're using gravitational manipulation as a weapon." Sujin nodded slowly, barely able to process what she was witnessing. That's supposed to be theoretical. The Concord Research Division has been working on it for decades without success. The Nexari response was immediate and desperate. Their remaining vessels opened fire with every weapon they possessed, filling space with plasma bolts, particle beams, and conventional kinetic projectiles. "Incoming fire," announced Jun Seo on the Indomitable's bridge. "Impact in 5 seconds. Admiral." Lee didn't flinch. "Activate quantum displacement fields." As the Nexari barrage reached the Earth fleet, something extraordinary happened. Rather than impacting against traditional energy shields, the incoming fire simply missed. Beams that should have struck Earth vessels directly instead passed through empty space, as if the ships weren't where they appeared to be. "Quantum displacement functioning perfectly," reported the science officer with quiet pride. "Their targeting systems cannot compensate." The Nexari overseer raged as report after report came in of weapons failing to hit their targets. "How is this possible? They cannot all be using holographic decoys. Not decoys, Overseer, responded his technical advisor. The readings suggest they're manipulating quantum probability fields. Their ships exist in slightly different positions than they appear to. In the colony below, the defenders watched as the tide of battle shifted dramatically. The enemy fleet that had terrorized them for weeks was being systematically dismantled by forces they had never imagined existed. Earth actually came, whispered Sonoke, tears forming in her eyes. They really came for us. The Nexari made one final desperate gambit. Their command ship, a massive organic-mechanical hybrid vessel nearly 3 kilometers long, charged its primary weapon, a planet cracker beam designed to shatter continental plates. They're targeting the colony, shouted Junseo on the Indomitable. Energy buildup detected in their flagship's main cannon. Admiral Lee's response was immediate. Phantom Squadron, execute Protocol Omega. 5 sleek, dark vessels that had remained, hidden at the edges of the battle, suddenly activated their engines, accelerating to speeds that seemed impossible for ships their size. Even as they moved, they remained nearly invisible to sensors, their stealth systems bending light and energy around their hulls. The Nexari never saw them coming. One moment, their flagship was preparing to fire on the helpless colony. The next, the Phantom-class vessels had penetrated its defensive screen and attached themselves to its hull like remoras on a shark. Boarding teams deployed, came the report from the Phantom Squadron commander. Proceeding to Central Power Core. Inside the massive enemy flagship, Earth's elite strike teams, soldiers in powered armor, augmented with neural interfaces far beyond anything the Concorde had developed, moved with ruthless efficiency. They encountered the Nexari defenders, insectoid creatures in biological armor, and engaged them with weapons that disrupted their neural systems rather than attacking their physical forms. The aliens collapsed in confused heaps as the humans advanced, unstoppable. Within minutes, they had reached the ship's power core and planted quantum destabilization charges designed specifically to contain the explosion, preventing collateral damage to nearby vessels or the planet below. Charges set, reported the team leader. Extraction in progress. The Phantom ships detached from the flagship moments before the charges detonated. The resulting implosion was spectacular, yet controlled. The enormous vessel collapsed in on itself, condensing into a temporary micro-singularity. That winked out of existence seconds later, leaving nothing behind but scattered debris. In the colony command center, the defenders erupted in cheers as they watched the enemy flagship vanish from their sensor displays. The remaining Nexari vessels, now leaderless and outmatched, began scattered retreat attempts, only to be methodically intercepted by Earth's forces. Admiral Lee's voice once again echoed through the colony's communication systems, calm and reassuring. Zendar Colony, this is Admiral Lee. The enemy fleet has been neutralized. Earth has come home to her children. Prepare for ground teams to assist with your situation. Commander Sujin Park looked around at her exhausted, disbelieving officers, a strange mixture of relief and shock on her face. As the last enemy warship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, silence fell across the battlefield. The twisted, metal remains of alien vessels drifted through space, testimony to Earth's unexpected power. On the colony planet below, the people who had believed themselves abandoned gathered at windows and view screens, watching in stunned silence. Are those Earth ships? Whispered Commander Park, squinting at the unfamiliar designs that had appeared from nowhere to save them. The vessels bore no Concord markings, no familiar patterns. Their hulls gleamed with a strange metal that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Earth's shuttles, sleek and black like predatory birds, descended through the atmosphere toward the colony's central plaza. The colonists gathered, their faces a mixture of hope and disbelief. Many had never seen an Earth vessel in their lifetime. The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss. Admiral Lee stepped forward, her boots touching alien soil for the first time. Unlike the ornate uniforms of Concorde officers, hers was practical, designed for combat rather than ceremony. The insignias on her shoulder were unknown to any watching, symbols of Earth's hidden fleet. "You came," Commander Park managed to say, still staring at the unfamiliar ships, hovering protectively above the colony. "After all these years," Admiral Lee smiled, her weathered face showing both strength and compassion. "We received your call," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent plaza. "Earth never abandoned her children among the stars. We watched, we prepared, and when needed we came." Behind her, more officers emerged from the shuttles. Their movements were different from the Concorde soldiers, more fluid, more deadly. They carried weapons unlike anything the colonists had seen before. But the communications blackout, the border restrictions. Commander Park stammered. "A necessary deception," Admiral Lee explained, gesturing for her officers to secure the area. While the Concorde grew comfortable and politically divided, Earth rebuilt. "We developed technologies the Concorde scientists would consider impossible," one of the Earth soldiers demonstrated by touching a control on his wrist. His entire body briefly shimmered before becoming nearly invisible. Not the crude camouflage tech the Concorde used, but something far more advanced. "The swarm attacks have been happening for years," Park said. "The Concorde ignored our warnings, said we were exaggerating the threat." Admiral Lee's expression hardened. "We know. We've been monitoring everything. The Concorde Council was too concerned with trade profits to see the danger building at the edges of known space. Above them, more Earth vessels emerged from hyperspace, massive warships that dwarfed even the largest Concorde cruisers. Their hulls bore battle scars, evidence they had been fighting elsewhere before arriving here. This wasn't the first swarm attack we've countered," explained Lee as she walked with Park toward the colony's command center. "We've been secretly protecting outer colonies for the past 5 years while building our forces." Inside the command center, Lee activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. Red dots illuminated dozens of locations where swarm activity had been detected. They've been building hives throughout unclaimed space, preparing for a full-scale invasion. The attack here was just one small part of their plan. The colonists gathered around, amazed at the detailed intelligence Earth possessed. A young technician raised her hand. "What are they? The swarm?" Admiral Lee's face grew grim. "Artificial life forms, self-replicating machines built thousands of years ago by a civilization that destroyed itself. They've been dormant, drifting through deep space until recently." "What woke them?" Park asked. "The Concorde's expansion. Their mining operations disturbed a dormant hive." Lee pointed to a distant sector on the map. By the time anyone realized what had happened, the swarm had already begun rebuilding. Outside, Earth troops were deploying strange devices around the colony perimeter, defensive technology, unlike anything the colonists had seen. Some projected energy fields visible as faint blue domes, others burrowed into the ground, establishing an underground surveillance network. "Tomorrow, representatives from the Galactic Concorde will arrive," Admiral Lee continued. "They'll be shocked to find Earth forces already here, even more shocked to discover we've been fighting this war without their knowledge." Park looked troubled. "The Concorde won't like being shown up like this." "Perhaps not," Lee agreed with a slight smile, "but they'll have no choice but to acknowledge the truth. Earth didn't withdraw from galactic affairs due to weakness. We focused on building a defense force capable of countering threats they repeatedly ignored." As night fell on the colony, the Earth vessels maintained their protective formation overhead. In distant parts of the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out as Earth revealed its hidden strength. Secret bases activated, cloaked fleets decloaked, and agents embedded throughout Concorde space received their signals. Humanity had emerged from decades of self-imposed exile, not as refugees seeking protection, but as perhaps the most formidable military power in known space. And just in time, for the swarm was only the beginning of what waited in the darkness between stars. As Admiral Lee looked up at the night sky, she knew that tomorrow would begin a new chapter in human history. The secret was out. Earth had returned. To the galactic stage, not with diplomats and traders, but with warriors and weapons that would change the balance of power forever.